revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers. The revolution will be live.
Welcome to a heavy-hearted edition of the Rough Draft Sportscast. I am your host, Damon Kennedy. Today, we're not talking about sports. So if that's what you tuned in for, I'm sorry, but I don't have it in my heart today to talk about sports. I just don't have it. We're going to get into some real issues today that have to do with what's going on in the United Police States of America right now. It just feels like 2020 has just flipped a switch in the American psyche, and we just fell into this twilight zone with some crazy alternate dimension where everything we knew went 180 degrees. This has been by far the craziest 6 months of the 244-year history of the United States of America. However, that 8 minutes that Derek Chauvin shoved his knee into George Floyd's neck was not the beginning of it. The knee has been on the neck of the black man for over 400 years. Not just 8 minutes, but over 400 years. And you can see now that it has come to a culmination point where we're not going to hold back any longer. You have not listened to us. You have not appreciated all the things that we have done for this country. And all you have done is marginalize us and brutalize us and objectify us and monetize us. You have done everything possible except treat us as basic human beings. We have never been looked at as citizens in this country. We have always been looked at as some form of cattle, as some form of trade, as some form of monetization, as some form of way to make it life easier for you. Never once has the government taken a stand on our behalf. We had to literally fight for our freedom. And after that, we had to fight to be more than 3/5 of a man. And after that, we had to fight to vote. And after that, we had to fight for civil rights. And after that, now we have to fight not to just be killed in broad daylight on video in front of numerous witnesses pleading for this officer to just remove his knee from his neck. And all we are met with is a smirk, hands in pockets, while you continue to put your knee on this man while he is dying. There was no compassion. There was no concern for this man pleading for his life. All that these officers were concerned with was protecting each other. There were 4 total officers involved in the murdering of George Floyd. The murdering of George Floyd. I'll say it again. The murdering of George Floyd in the middle of the day on the streets of Minneapolis while bystanders were literally taking video and pleading for this to stop. Not a single one of those other 3 officers made any attempt to physically remove Chauvin from George Floyd's neck. Yes, there was one officer that they say, oh, hey, should we roll him on his side? That's all that you have, is that maybe we should roll him to his side. How about one of you getting up and saying, hey, remove your knee from his neck? We have him in the handcuffs. Let's put him in the car. Let's take him to the station for this supposedly counterfeit $20 bill that he tried to pass off to buy cigarettes and food for his kids. Come on. This was a 46-year-old grown man face down on the ground, handcuffed behind his back, 3 other officers on his legs, 1 other officer looking around while this man is literally being murdered in the middle of the street, and not one of those officers did a damn thing to stop it. And this is sadly just one illustration of the systemic breakdown that is the fraternal order of the police force. Not just in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but all around the entire country, because we are going to get into multiple things today that have to do with black outrage and have to do with incidents of black people being murdered indiscriminately by police or hunted down in the middle of the street like a dog because someone feels that you are doing something wrong by simply being present, by simply being alive, by simply having the gall to be in their neighborhood when they feel that you shouldn't. And what is so sad and so incredibly heartbreaking about this George Floyd situation is that this is not the first instance in just the last 3 months that we as a black community have had to deal with something like this, something as similar as a broad daylight murder in the case of 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery, who was murdered on February 23rd, 2020 for simply jogging around his neighborhood in the middle of the day, might I add. He was murdered by two vigilantes by the name of Travis and Gregory McMichael. And also they were accompanied by one William Roddy Bryan, who followed Ahmaud in his truck while filming it in an effort to corner him so that William could get video of the apprehension by Travis and Gregory McMichael, which, as we know, turned into a struggle for Ahmaud Arbery's life, where he fought valiantly against these two horrible, hatred, thug vigilantes as they tried to stop this man on a suspicion of robbery of a domicile, because all he did was look into a house that is under construction, as a million other people have done on any house that is under construction in a neighborhood. They decided to take it upon themselves and stop Ahmaud Arbery with loaded weapons. They didn't wait for police because they thought that they were the police. George McMichael was a Glenn County Police Department officer from 1982 to 1989, and then he moved on to be an investigator in the Brunswick Judicial Circuit Court from 1995 to 2019. So he felt that he could take it upon himself to make a citizen's arrest, which by some ungodly measure is still legal in the state of Georgia. But he decided to take it upon himself, him and Travis, to stop Ahmaud because they felt that he was robbing a house. So after these two deplorable thugs murder Ahmaud Arbery in the middle of the street on February 23rd, on February 27th, the DA's office in the Brunswick Judicial Circuit Court, headed by one Jackie Johnson, advised that there were no arrests to be made in that particular situation because it was taken on the word of George McMichael that it was a self-defense killing, that Ahmaud Arbery took it upon himself to attack these two men who were holding weapons, and that they actually feared for their lives, so that's why they killed him. And it was taken on that word by the DA's office that there were going to be no charges filed. Coincidentally, Jackie Johnson was also George McMichael's boss when he worked for the Brunswick Judicial Circuit Court, so she had to recuse herself from this particular investigation because she had ties with George McMichael. So it was then moved over to George Barnhill in a neighboring county, who, surprise, surprise, also said that there were supposed to be no charges filed. And then he had to recuse himself on April 2nd because of his connections to George McMichael. How crazy is this situation? And the most insane part is that it was not until a video was leaked by George McMichael's attorney on May 5th that actually put that horrible video out there for people to see. And the absolute nuts part about it is that George McMichael thought that this video would exonerate him. He realistically thought that any jury who saw this video would conclude the way he did, that Ahmaud Arbery was a threat and that him and his son needed to roll up with two loaded weapons to stop one unarmed man jogging down the street in the middle of the day. Not only that, but he had to be followed and cornered by a third man who had to take video of this because they thought that they would be that much in the right. How crazy is this, that a black man has to be cornered by three grown men for jogging in the middle of the street in the middle of the day, and they thought that this video would be the thing to exonerate them? They were free for 74 days after the incident. 74 days. Think about that. 74 nights they got to sleep in their bed thinking that they were going to be exonerated because they killed a black man in the middle of the street, but it was a citizen's arrest because he was suspected of robbing a house. How crazy is that we are just that low on the totem pole in the grand scheme of the human experience in the United States of America, that we can be shot down in the middle of the street and someone can go home for 74 days and have two different judicial circuit courts say that there should be no charges filed because they took the word of a former police officer, of a former investigator. Once again, we have been shown that there is a fraternal order that goes down in the law enforcement and in the judicial community that is stacked against us from the beginning. It does not matter the circumstances. And that is the exact reason why Officer Chauvin felt so comfortable to continue to place pressure on George Floyd's neck with his knee. That is why Officer Chauvin felt so comfortable as to put his hands in his pockets while people were filming him. That is why he felt so comfortable as to smirk directly into the camera. That is why he felt so comfortable as to continue to apply pressure after George Floyd had already lost consciousness. That is why we are burning the cities to the ground. That is why we are outraged. That is why we are attacking the institutions of the United States of America. That is why we are mobilizing all around the country. That is why we are hurt. That is why we are standing up. That is why we were kneeling during the national anthem. That is why we are doing everything in our power to make you listen, because you have not responded to us when we have been peaceful. You only seem to respond to us when we are showing the same amount of force and the same amount of neglect and the same amount of destruction that you have shown us throughout these last 400 years. And now you want to be offended. Now you want to be fearful. Now you want to speak out and tell us that you understand our pain. You just don't feel that we should do it in this particular manner. Well, isn't that what we were doing when Colin Kaepernick decided to take a knee against police brutality? Was that not his stance? Was that not the peaceful protest that you would have liked us to do? But no, once again, it was an affront to you. It was an affront to the way that you think of the establishment of the United States of America. It is the affront to the Tommy Laurens and the Laura Ingrahams of the world, who feel that we should shut up and dribble, who feel that we should only be here for your entertainment, as we have been from the beginning when you had us in human zoos, when you kept us in captivity, when you kept us in bondage, when you forced us to work in a foreign land, when you took away our history, when you took away our familial ties, when you took away our entire country, when you took away the greatest resource in the world, which is the African culture, which is the original cradle of civilization, which is where everything began. No. We were not ever looked at as something to be prized. We were only looked at as something to be controlled, as something to be monetized, as something to be traded, and ultimately as something to be extinguished. Too often these situations arise where a black man or a black woman is murdered at the hands of police and there is no credible investigation. There are no charges filed. Everyone involved in the situation was in the right except for the murdered victim. Much in the case of Breonna Taylor, age 26, murdered on March 13th by the Louisville Metro Police Department at 1 a.m. as she sleeping in her bed. Sleeping in her bed. The Louisville Police Department came in the middle of the night on a no-knock warrant, busted in the door, and shot her 8 times while she was sleeping in her bed. And as unfortunate as the situation was for Breonna Taylor to be murdered in the middle of the night, the situation was just as equally as bad for her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, who shot back at the police, who did not identify themselves as they busted in at 1 a.m, and he ended up shooting an officer that came into their house in the middle of the night, and he was taken into custody on charges of attempted murder and assault on a police officer and given a $250,000 cash bond. Now, he has since been released by the Louisville Police Department pending the conclusion of the investigation as to whether or not the police were justified in their shooting of Breonna Taylor, which, as we know, they were not, because they were serving a warrant for a trap house that was over 10 miles away for a suspect that they already had in police custody. So we have to wonder, where is the communication breakdown happening with these police officers and with these police departments that they can just burst in the door unannounced, release 22 shots, killing an innocent person, and they still have no charges filed against these police officers? And coincidentally, there is no body cam footage of this incident because the Criminal Interdiction Division of the Louisville Police Department are not required to wear body cams. So once again, a black victim is left to be murdered at the hands of the police with no means of telling their side of the story, with no means of refuting the inevitable lies told by the officers involved. Instead, we are once again at the mercy of a criminal justice system that has a proven track record of disregarding the plight of the black American. That is why you will continue to see the uprisings around the country, why you will continue to have to extinguish the fires, why you will have to continue to hear our shouts in the street because we are tired of asking. We are tired of standing idly by and waiting for it to happen. We are tired of being cast aside by a government with a proven track record of disregard for black lives. We are tired of being tired, and now it has become time for us to act. It is time for us to mobilize. It is time for us to realize the power that we wield in this country when we unite for a common goal. It is time for us to make the establishment uncomfortable. It is time to demand change. And if it is not given to us, we have to take it. So once the fires have smoldered, once the smoke is cleared, when the ashes have settled, it is time for us as a people to march en masse to the ballot boxes in November and vote this president out of office. Because Trump is the epitome of white supremacy in this country. He wears it proudly. He doesn't shy away from it. He doesn't hide his face under a white hood. He stands proudly in front of the White House and demands that we remember our place. And sadly, we've all become too familiar with the feeling of seeing someone we have known for all of our lives, people that we work with, people that we go to school with, people that we go to church with, echo the statements of this unapologetically racist dictator. It is time to form a new government, one that is actually for the people and by the people. It is time for Black Americans to stop waiting and start voting. We cannot afford to skip this election. Whether you like Joe Biden or not, it is time to mobilize and change the government from the top if we want to see changes. But while we're here in the present, I implore you all to stay vigilant because sadly we are still waiting for justice for Breonna Taylor, for Ahmaud Arbery, and for George Floyd. So yes, Officer Chauvin was arrested and charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter, but we all know how these things tend to play out in court even when there is video evidence of the incident. The ME report was initially released with the cause of death not being listed as asphyxiation, but of underlying health issues. The Floyd family actually had to get their own independent autopsy done to confirm the actual cause of death. So you can already see how they are trying to slant this thing. Like you can already see it with the manslaughter charge. The only reason that they tack a manslaughter charge onto the end of a third-degree murder charge is so that there is some wiggle room for them to plead this thing down. They are simply setting us up for the okie doke that they always pull on us when they pull these police officers in and they charge them with these incidents. They all of a sudden end up being underlying circumstances or mitigating circumstances that ends up with them getting off or them being able to plead down. I will not be surprised at all if this man is not actually convicted on that third-degree murder charge, but they end up giving him that manslaughter and he ends up doing less than 5 years. I can just already see it. And guess what? The city will burn again. The Minneapolis Police Department has to take responsibility for this. The Hennepin County District Attorney, Keith Ellison, must do the right thing. They have to throw the book at this man. They have to give him the full amount of time allotted for a third-degree murder charge. There can be no plea deal because he did not listen to the pleas of George Floyd as he had his knee on his neck for over 8 minutes as he murdered him in the middle of the street. His pleas went unheard. Therefore, he should not get a plea. There should be a full-on murder conviction and he should have to spend the rest of his life in prison. Now, in the case of Ahmaud Arbery, it actually took the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to bring charges against George and Travis McMichael, and they have actually been charged with first-degree felony murder. That is exactly where the charge needs to land. William Roddy Bryan has also been charged with connection to first-degree felony murder. That is exactly where the charges should land. But once again, be prepared for the okie doke because I do not see them being convicted of first-degree felony murder. I see this fraternal order of both the judicial and the police system that is going to find some type of way to get the McMichaels a lesser sentence because at the end of the day, it was a black man that was murdered. And as long as we have the type of government leadership that we have, we will never get a fair shake when it comes to these type of trials. Much like Breonna Taylor and Kenneth Walker. As of right now, there have been no charges filed against those officers. There have been no arrests made against those officers, yet Kenneth Walker is still being forced to fight for his life, while the love of his life lays dead in a casket because the Louisville Police Department decided to bust into their home at 1 o'clock in the morning unannounced and released 22 shots into their apartment, 8 of which landed into Breonna Taylor and killed her while she laid in her sleep. And my final point on this is that we as a black community need to stop leaning on celebrities and need to stop leaning on sports stars to show us how we should feel about things. It is time for us to start having some independent thought. Like, yes, these people are in positions of power, but we too are in positions of power. We too get to create the government that we want by voting accordingly, by showing up accordingly, by making sure that our representatives know that we are heard. So we need to stop relying on the LeBron Jameses of the world, the Steph Currys of the world, the ESPNs of the world, because yes, they do have a platform and yes, they do speak for us. But at the end of the day, we need to lean on ourselves and we need to speak for ourselves as a black community. We need to get out there and mobilize and we need to stop taking these things lying down. Otherwise, it will continue to happen to us. So as black Americans, we all all need to make sure that we are on the same page here, that we will not allow this to continue, that we will continue to fight until our voices are heard, and we will continue to fight until we have equal rights, not just civil rights, but equal rights. So once again, this is Damon Kennedy signing off from episode 3 of the Rough Draft Sportscast. I hope you all stay together. I hope you all stay united. I hope you all stay safe. And most of all, I hope you all take this time to really just reflect on what's going on in the country and realize that we have the power to change things.
Will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers. The revolution will be live.